Morning, students. Welcome to all of you in class 7th. Now today we are here to read and enjoy a beautiful poetry. The name of the poetry is The Squirrel and it is from your book Honeycomb, class 7th, and this is poetry number 1 of the book. The name of the poetry is, once again I am telling you, that is The Squirrel, and the poet is Mildred Bowers Armstrong. Okay, let's student read and enjoy this beautiful short and sweet poetry. Now let's read and recite the poetry. He wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. So children, you can see it's a very short poetry, but it's a lovely one based on the nature, because the poet is focused on the nature and a very beautiful creature of the nature, that is squirrel. I think all of you have seen the squirrel. That is a lovely creature created by the god. Now let's read it once more. He wore a question mark for tail, an overcoat of grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. He liked to tease and play, and if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. Now students, here he is referred to the squirrel. Now let's discuss the glossary, that is word meaning of the poetry, new words from the poetry and its meaning. Now here you can see overcoat. Overcoat, that is long coat. All of you know that. Tease, that is annoy. Straight, that is erect. Nut, that is hard dry fruit. Grey, that is ash color. Way, that is a road around on every side. Now see, let's do the appreciation part of the poetry. Now see, in the beginning line, the poet is saying, he wore a question mark for a tail. So you can see how beautifully the poet is saying and describing the beauty of the squirrel, that he wore a question mark. So you can see the imagination of the poet. Here students, the poet want to say that we can see the shape of its tail just look like a question mark. It looks like in the form of a question mark. So it's really amazing and it's really lovely also. An overcoat of grey. See, the visualization of the poet is really creative one. He visualizes the squirrel as a human being, and the person is wearing an overcoat of grey color. And here, if you can see that the squirrel is having a skin with a long fur like a coat. The poem gives a description of the squirrel who was sitting on the ground and eating a nut. His tail resembled a question mark. The color of his furry skin was grey. He sat up straight to eat a nut. The little creature was playful by his nature. Now, let's see what is given in the next line. He sat up straight to eat up a nut. So, again the poet is saying he. Who is he? He is the squirrel. He sat up straight to eat up a nut. Now you can see the squirrel is holding a nut in his hand. He liked to tease and play. See how beautifully the poet describes the squirrel, that he liked. He is behaving like a person. He liked to tease and play. He loved to play hide and seek just like you people. To tease and play. Now you can see there is a beautiful literary device also. I think all of you are familiar with the alliteration. You can see to tease, there is repetition of the same sound. So here it is beautiful use of alliteration. Tease and play means it sometimes behave in the way that it doesn't have fear of us. And if we ran around his tree, he went the other way. Now you can see the author is saying that if we means human being, ran around his tree, the squirrel sometimes run away and sometimes it may run around the tree but in the opposite direction. So it's a lovely creature of the imagination of the poet. Now see the theme of the poetry, a summary. Now here the poet saw a squirrel sitting on a tree and eating nuts. Its tail was raised upwards with tip pointing downwards. Thus the tail seemed to be making a question mark. It had a grey coat. It was so loose that the poet calls it an overcoat. In order to eat a nut, it was sitting straight. Squirrel is funny little animal that likes to play with us. If we run around his tree, the squirrel would not fear. It would like to tease and play, and to do so, it would also run around the tree, but from the opposite side. Okay, students, now you have seen that this poetry is based on imagination. As all of you know that poetry is a work of imagination, and you can see the poetry is beautifully described. This poetry is beautifully described by the poet by using the alliteration and various figures of speech. We will discuss it in our later class. Now let's see the question answers based on the same poetry. Here, question number 1 is, why does the poet say the squirrel wore a question mark for a tail? It's very simple. The answer is, the poet said the squirrel wore a question mark by seeing the shape of a tail, especially when the squirrel raises it upward to sit. Number 2, do we usually say that an animal wears a tail? What do we say? No, we do not usually say that an animal wears a tail, but we say that animals wear a coat in the form of fur, what they have on their skin. Question number 3. He liked to tease and play. Now see, who is teasing whom? The squirrel teases human beings. It does so when it eats nuts and other fruit which human beings eat. Okay, children, I hope that you have enjoyed this beautiful, short, and simple poetry. Now we will continue in the next lesson. Thank you, all of you. Have a nice day. For leaving, children, I have a beautiful video based on a squirrel who is playing in the lap of nature. Now look at the video and enjoy it.